go. With that, we'll open our hearing. Sorry for the brief delay.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry for, that was me being loud. Okay, sorry for the brief delay, but 3 minutes late, that's not bad. Want to make sure that everything's working correctly. And with that, we'll open our hearing for the Enterprise Canal Company Limited, the appeal for the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval for the mining operation related to the optical recharge site on 55th East. Everything that was part of the record from the planning and zoning hearing, all of the testimony, all of the evidence, everything that's been submitted, without any objection will be made part of the record for this hearing. Anything else, Austin? As we have all three commissioners, director from planning and zoning, and the staff, and our legal counsel, Montgomery County. And with that, we will hear first from Millers. Oh, yeah. Commissioner Mallard would like to clarify a few things before we start. Loud.
All right, thank you all so much for coming. We really do appreciate the public's interest in this issue. We do want to clarify, however, that this is a hearing only for oral argument on the appeal of the planning and zoning decision. I'm trying to make that non-legalese. But what we're here to do today is only to hear argument from the Millers and Enterprise and their attorneys about why the Planning and Zoning Commission was either right or wrong on their findings that were issued on, what was the date?
February 7th.
On February 7th of this year. So, this takes a bit of an odd posture because the Millers filed an appeal before the findings were issued and before any permit was issued. So no permit has been issued in this case. So you can argue to us, the Millers and Enterprise only, no other public statements can be taken about whether or not the planning and zoning decision was correct based on the information they had there, or whether the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision was incorrect. Their findings were incorrect or correct based on what they knew at the time of that decision. And as Chairman Walker said, we as commissioners have received other materials, but we will not consider anything in our decision except for the materials that the Planning and Zoning Commission received. That's the way the appeals work. You have to present everything down below that needs to be presented. And then we review that decision. Otherwise, we never come to an end of the information. So on a legal basis, we can only consider what the Planning and Zoning Commission considered. And today, we can only consider and argue for or against. We can only hear argument for or against their decision in their February 7th letter. And please, either the Millers or Enterprise, feel free to correct me if you think I've stated any of that incorrectly.
Mr. Casperson going to read the public notice.
This is the amended notice of public hearing, and this was amended from an original meeting that was scheduled for March 5th, and now it's rescheduled for today. Notice is hereby given that the following public hearing will be held by the Bonneville County Commissioners in the Bonnewood County Courthouse, 605 North Capitol, Idaho Falls, Idaho. The date and time of the hearing, Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025, 30 p.m. And that was published in the Post Register on March 18th, 2005.
We'll hear from the Millers first. Dana and Darla can both speak, or just one, whatever you choose, and then we'll hear from Enterprise. And that's because the Millers filed first appeal, Enterprise filed the cross appeal. So that will be the order. Go ahead. We should also note that we have spent a lot of time reading through the materials and the transcript from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask that, so thank you.
And before we start, for those of you that are hearing impaired like some of us, the screens are subtitling this for you, so if you watch the screen, you can read the captions and maybe keep up, just what I tend to do on a regular basis. So with that, ladies.
Thank you. And I'll try to speak fairly loud as if I can. Hopefully they can hear me, or that you guys can at least hear me, which is important. I would like to clarify just a couple of things that you might have said, Ms. Mallard. The reason that we filed our appeal prior to it even coming out was because we were told by Planning and Zoning 4 different times that, and in an email, that we were required to turn our appeal in by February the 1st was the date that we had. We didn't have final written, we didn't have transcripts, we had nothing. So they were able to give me a copy of the hearing call, and I had to go through and transcribe it myself for my own use because I didn't have it. And they were sticking to the fact that I had to have it in by midnight on February the 1. And so we were quite frustrated and feel a little behind the 8 ball in the fact that we were told that, and that no one ever gave us any option of doing it differently. And we didn't want to miss the appeal because we feel like we have something to say. And then Enterprise has an advantage because they were able to take our information, see our information, because at that point it was public, and know what to put in their cross appeal, which we didn't know they were going to do. And then to us, in our minds, they turned it in very late, and it should not be considered at all because it wasn't. And I understand their point. I don't agree with it, but their point was, well, it's when 10 days from the written information, when the written confirmation is put out from Planning and Zoning, not 10 days from the hearing. But even the night of the hearing, Mr. Black indicated we had 10 days from that day to turn in the appeal information, and nothing was ever given to us. So we do want that information as you go forward. And thank you. Would you put my, thank you, she's getting it. I had a little trouble with my laptop, but we worked it out. So she's going to put just a little presentation. It's easier for me. My memory isn't as good as it used to be for lots of reasons. And so I needed to write down things. So I would like to just start by knowing that we agree that today we are here to discuss the reasons and the errors in the decisions of Bonneville County Planning and Zoning made when they made the determination. I would like to start by things that we all agree on, and you'll have to kind of go along with me. I don't know how to tell you when to flip the slide. Okay, things that we all agree on is that we don't really need to discuss at length today, is that the aquifer is definitely in need of recharge. The aquifer recharge basin, which are ARBs and injection wells, can help recharge the aquifer. And East Idaho is committed to preserving its water resources and ensuring as much water as possible stays within our region. Dana and I agree with that wholeheartedly, and we cannot express how important that is to us. Many people don't understand what an ARB actually is. We have said or heard multiple times, well, at least you're going to have lakeside property. We will not have lakeside property. ARBs are only recharging approximately 60 days per year, but the other 305 days of the year are just big piles of rocks. And if you look to the basin that they finished 1 year ago, roughly 1 year ago, to the direct south of us, which is probably not even 300 feet away from my property line, is just a big pile of rocks the rest of the year. And opinion, it is ugly. It does not have landscaping, etc. Crushing on the large piles of gravel that is there currently that they have stacked will take years and years and years and years. ARBs are needed. However, gravel pits are not needed. They are not required to get water into the ground. So you ask, what did planning and zoning err on when they made their decision? Well, we found multiple things that we feel like were errors. But in order to understand that, you need a quick timeline. Enterprise Canal Company secured funding from Idaho Department of Water Resources, IDWR, prior to obtaining a request for a permit from Bonneville County Planning and Zoning. Then, around November the 1st or 2nd, they began digging and stacking dirt on the west side of their property next to the Miller's property with no communication at all to the Millers whatsoever. We were never, they never checked in with us. They never communicated to us. They never asked us, encouraged us. There was never a conversation between us and anyone from Enterprise Canal Company as to what we thought. Yet they were telling people everybody's fine with this. All of the neighbors agree with this. We'd never been approached. P&Z erred by allowing ECC to continue to build a basin without a permit and without guidelines and prior to any public hearing being held. On November the 23rd is when we even found out what was going on. We saw them digging, but we didn't know what they were doing. But on November the 23rd, we received a certified public announcement to elicit public comment about a potential project for temporary gravel pit, which would eventually be reclaimed as an ARB. And that public hearing was to be held December the 4th. So we found out about 10 days before that hearing. So we quickly put together information and submitted what we could, knowing what we knew at that time. ECC continued without the permit and before the public hearing, continued stacking thousands of yards of dirt. I have pictures from way before that December 4th hearing. I didn't bring them today, but they were in the packets that planning and zoning has. And so I'm presuming that you will have those and have access to those of dirt that is stacked that you can see literally from my backyard that is huge. And that was way before the hearing. ECC created an unpermitted road onto 55th East next to our driveway. This was without the permission of Road and Bridge, and this is per Road and Bridge. They never gave access to that driveway that they had on 55th East prior to either one of the hearings. In fact, they had not talked to Enterprise. Enterprise did talk to Idaho Transportation Department, and according to what they told us, they said, Enterprise just wants to use a different driveway. And they said, that's fine with us, but they didn't go to Road and Bridge and actually obtain a permit to get a driveway there. So that is a problem. And they started using it and made a big driveway. And it is a mess by my driveway. They're cracking, not concrete, but the roadway and part of our driveway from the trucks going in. On December the 4th, public hearing was held. And after hours of testimony, planning and zoning could not decide how to proceed. And they put a stay to try to obtain guidelines from the state about these water basins or how to permit them, including those with requested gravel pits. We thought that was an excellent idea that they would say, let's at least get some guidelines before we permit this. Over and over, planning and zoning commissioners indicated how unfair it was to the Millers for Enterprise to put one of these basins in, let alone 2 or 3 of them next to their home and surround them, especially given the issues Millers were subject to from the first basin, which was built unpermitted. I hope that you will read through the transcripts because we did define in detail the issues that we had from the first basin a year ago. That is part of this because they're trying to permit it. It was part of the decision making that planning and zoning came up with. We had sand in our well, we had cracks in our ceiling from when they compacted, and many other things that December the after the first meeting, when there was a stay until the next January and December, while planning and zoning waited for a state response and guidance, ECC continued without a building permit, a digging permit and a gravel pit, stacking thousands more yards of dirt pit. When P and Z did not receive state assistance of guidelines, P and Z erred by not creating a set of regulatory requirements to which canal companies would need to adhere to prior to obtaining a permit. P and Z did not enforce ECC to pause while any such regulations could be created. Of note, IDWR indicated in their response that they would be 100% follow whatever P and Z decided. So you would have that letter within the P and Z packet that they gave you. I'm sure you have read that. So they were in favor of whatever planning and zoning decided. January the 22nd of 2025, the second public hearing was held. When P and Z commissioners began to deliberate, it was evident that several of the commissioners had not read the written materials that had been submitted by the public, also including information that we had submitted. We knew this because when my husband was speaking, they were saying, no, where's that? Where's that letter? What's that? Do we have that? And they would ask Mr. Black, do we have that? Do we have that? What is that? Where is this? As if they'd never heard it before, but it was in their packet. This was an error on the planning and zoning's part by not completely familiarizing themselves with information within their packet, which had been turned in ahead of time for them to review. They were confused on what the project actually was that they were voting on. They were saying, they asked, were we to approve the previous basin that was never permitted? Are we approving the new basin that they're digging now? Are they approving the new temporary use gravel pit? Is it A and B, A and C, B and C, none of the above, all the above? They were very confused on their deliberations. Some of the things that were said, one commissioner thought it was just the gravel pit, and we were sitting right next to the commissioner so we could hear as they spoke, just whispering to each other. One commissioner thought it was both, that they were arguing, no, we're not doing that. You don't need to consider that. Yes, you do need to consider that. And that's what's by the time they got to deliberations, they were still unsure what they were supposed to be voting on. And none seemed to realize that they were to approve an already created aquifer resource basin that was built a year ago and that was constructed without ever having the permit. Commissioner Hoff said this is way above our pay grade and isn't fair that we have to decide this. I thought it was probably the best statement of the entire meeting because everyone kind of agreed this is a very difficult situation to look at one homeowner that's being so impacted versus a canal company, their rights versus our rights. Multiple commissioners indicated they didn't know what their authority was or how much they could regulate or what guidelines they could even create. They erred by making a decision when they felt they wanted to have requirements in place, but were told by P&Z staff that they could only make suggestions but could not make requirements. We believe this is emphatically incorrect. ECC's argument has always been, this project is just about putting water in the ground. But it isn't. It's much more than that. It's about them wanting a gravel pit as much as it is about an aquifer recharge basin. P&Z made several errors when considering the 13 requirements of section 1-705. Number one, the access impact on existing agricultural operations. P&Z concluded there were no effect on the agricultural operations. This is incorrect. The land that is being used was previously used as farm ground as recent as last year in 2024. Converting agricultural land in a gravel pit significantly reduces crop production, which plays a crucial role in supporting our ecosystem and food supply. The land was previously flood irrigated for 30 years that we are aware of, and probably in reality over 100 years it was flood irrigated. This now removes that flood irrigated water so that they can put a basin in to store the water. And though there are benefits from the basin, they're taking out this ground that was flood irrigated, and they could have had both should they have chosen a different land. So P and Z erred because they didn't consider how removing a flood irrigated farmland would affect agricultural operations. Number 2, establish the need for the proposed change. The board agreed there is a need to recharge the aquifer, but they failed to address the necessity for the gravel pit. They did discuss other canal companies being able to do recharge basins without the need to put in a gravel pit. During discussions, they stated the gravel pit could be detrimental to surrounding neighbors and community. In the December 4th meeting, they discussed that the burden could be hauled off-site and sold or crushed elsewhere. But they erred because by looking only at the need for the aquifer recharge basin and failing to look at the need for the gravel pit when both were being permitted was an error on their part. They also neglected its critical responsibilities by failing to impose specific requirements for the gravel pit regulations and not enforcing the already established gravel pit guidelines. There is no benefit to the community for this gravel pit. As Mr. Kerr indicated, they would use the gravel for their own projects. Bonneville County has guidelines for gravel pits, and P&Z did not follow them. This is not temporary. Mr. Kerr indicated it could be 7 to 10 years or more for the gravel pit to crush all that gravel. P&Z erred by not putting a timeline on how long they could crush gravel or need to have it hauled off-site. IDWR was not even aware that ECC was doing a gravel pit when they approved their grant. Commissioner Hoff said the proximity of the proposed gravel pit will violate the 300-foot rule. The gravel pit is in no way beneficial to the community or to the neighborhood because gravel is only benefiting Enterprise and their other projects. Number 3, assessing the benefit of the proposed change to the county and the neighborhood. P&Z erred by not requiring ECC to finalize a plan prior to approval to understand the full extent of how it would affect the neighborhood. Several commissioners brought up that they did not have a final plan, and in fact, there were 3 different plans submitted at various times by Enterprise. None seemed to know for sure what the project would look like in its finality. The plans were not the same also as what they turned into the IDWR. One set of plans showed 2 additional basins, one of which is right directly next to my property line on my east. P&Z also erred by not reviewing content in their packets pertaining to information on how the ARB and the gravel pit would impact the neighborhood. In December, P&Z commissioners requested Millers produce written proof of devaluation, issues with their well, estimates to fix our plumbing issues from all of the sand, evidence of cracks and ceilings in our ceilings, the damages, etc. We turned all of this in for the January 22nd meeting, and it was in the packets. Yet, based on the comments and questions by many of the commissioners during public presentation and during deliberations, it was evident several had not read the information or known these answers and what was in their packet. Our packet included our plumbing costs to fix the system for all the sand that went into our well after it emptied the basin to the south of our property, photos of the damaged cracked ceilings due to vibrations when ECC compacted. We also had photos of sand showing it in our toilets, in our sinks, and the large amount that ruined my washing machine, and I did just have to replace it. It had so much sand in it, it was unbelievable. Estimate of the cost to fix our cracks in the ceiling from when they compacted. Realtor letter indicating our devaluation of our property and coverage of personal property rights of homeowners. And that was extensive. He put a lot of effort and time into the devaluation of our home and the rights that we have as homeowners. And none of that was considered. And then we had before and after photos of dirt caked on our buildings. We showed before what they looked like and after the dirt was there. P and Z erred by not looking at this material after we submitted it at their request and not taking into consideration how this project was destroying a residence as well as impacting the entire neighborhood. P and Z did not take into effect Idaho Code 52-101 when they rendered their decision. Property owners in Idaho have protected rights under state law and common principles, right to a quiet environment without substantial interference. Idaho Code 52-101 includes activities that cause significant dust, noise, or vibrations, which may constitute a private nuisance. This oversight by P and Z demonstrates a failure to balance the benefits of the project with the rights and the well-being of the local residents. Number 4, access compatibility of the proposed change with the comprehensive plan. P and Z had notable flaws in comparing the proposed change with the comprehensive plan, as the P and Z commissioners were not sure whose comprehensive plan was meant to compare the proposed change against. They didn't know if that was Bonneville County's comprehensive plan or if it was ECC's comprehensive plan. So P and Z erred because they made a decision not knowing what plan to compare it against. Commissioner Martin said the plans, the plans Enterprise presented were not clear. ECC submitted multiple plans, as we talked about before, and no definite determination was ever announced to which ECC plan was they were actually approving. How many basins were being approved? Where were the basins located? Where was the gravel pit in relation to the basins? None of these were decided or determined. This confusion by P and Z demonstrates a lack of alignment with the actual comprehensive plan and was a critical oversight and undermines the decision's validity. P and Z also erred by not addressing the potential negative impacts on the county and the neighborhood, and further highlights the board's disregard to ensure this compatibility. Number 5, access proximity to fire protection. The P and Z board failed to adequately assess the proximity to fire protection. Mr. Black did indicate that they had reached out to fire department, and I think it was without any follow-up information. But this lack of input from the fire department raises concerns about the adequacy of fire protection should something go wrong, especially with a gravel pit for this proposed project. Ensuring that emergency services are properly considered and involved in the review process is crucial for the safety and readiness of emergency response teams. Number 6, similar access proximity to police protection. The P and Z board failed to adequately assess the proximity to the police protection services. This lack of input from law enforcement raises concerns about the adequacy of police protection for the proposed project. Ensuring that the sheriff's department is properly considered and involved in the review process is crucial for maintaining safety and security in the area. P and Z failed to consider emergency services or access their proximity for protection and quick response. How would an ambulance arrive? Where would they enter the property? It was never determined that the driveway on 55th was ever the legal driveway. The legal driveway, to our knowledge, still exists on the Ryrie Highway, Highway 26. If someone were to call an ambulance, let's say somebody had a heart attack there. If they were to call an ambulance and they were to drive in, they would probably go to that entrance and they would drive directly into a pit. So that wouldn't work either. It will waste time. It could be the difference of life and death. You never know what's going to happen. Access impacts, number 7, access impacts on traffic loads and public access. The P and Z failed to obtain a traffic plan prior to their approval when it is clearly required. ECC, along with both ITD and Road and Bridge, were to submit this critical information prior to approval. They did have some information from ITD, who essentially said, I don't care if they use the other driveway. That was essentially it. They had nothing from Road and Bridge, who said, yes, he's been down or they've been down. We have a permit. We've allowed it. We've given them a new driveway. Maybe that's happened today. To our knowledge, it hasn't. We spoke with them a couple of weeks ago And they said they have never entered our office and requested a permit, and that's Road and Bridge. There were no traffic plans or results or analysis related to any traffic loads, access to public roads, width of the right of way. Only approved driveway again on this property was US 26. And I've told you about the others that no one, Road and Bridge didn't give permission to access that property. They called it an unauthorized entry road. Number 7, continued. Commissioner Storms brought up that IDWR indicated ECC needed to comply with all federal, state, and local laws. She brought ECC saying that it was an unlawful road access. Even at the time of the hearing, she brought up that they were using an unlawful road access and that the only legal entry was on Highway 26. It was stated transparently and communication needed to be worked out with this regard before a permit was given. This is a violation, and P&Z erred in allowing the permit when ECC was illegally using a non-allowed driveway for heavy equipment, trucks, cars, pickups, and other such, which is directly next to the Miller's driveway. Bonneville County Planning and Zoning did not put this in their requirements when they gave the permit prior to approval. This was a critical oversight and is an error by the P&Z Commission. Number 8, Health Department approval. The decision was made without mandatory Health Department approval, and P&Z erred in doing so. Since their approval is mandatory for this project's viability, the lack of this crucial endorsement invalidates the board's decision to approve the project. Proceeding without Health Department approval poses significant risk to the public and safety, and especially to us, given the proximity we are to what they're doing. Our well and our septic system is directly by these properties. And we've already had well problems. They're putting in a basin, at least as our understanding from what they said at the first hearing, 2.5 times the size of the first basin, have much more water. And as their own engineer testified, or if it was at the first or the second meeting, I think it was at the second, but I might have that backwards. But as she testified, she said, we expected sand to be in the well and sediments. We expected all of that. And I'm like, well, why didn't you warn us? Why didn't you tell us? We're right here. They should have made them do so. And the reason that she said that they expected it, and it made sense. She said, as water comes down, it's going to push the sand and the sediment, everything out of its way so that it can make its way to the aquifer. That makes sense. It's got to be displaced. And sadly, it got displaced into our well because our well is where our driveway is. So, excuse me, proceeding without this, and in looking at our septic system, we don't want that flooded out either. Water doesn't run just straight down. It's going to run out, and there is a chance with that much water that we could get flooded out with our septic. And the gravel and the dust also pose significant health risks. Not only to myself, I do have a lot of issues which we can or can't go into, but dirt and gravel dust are very different. Dirt dust is bad, gravel dust is worse, as far as a significant lung issue. Number 9, assess the need for buffers and landscaping. The board has inadequately assessed the need for buffers and landscaping to mitigate noise, dust, and vibrations per the requirement of Idaho State Code 18-5901 related to a public nuisance. Many of the commissioners agreed that they have already been negative effects from the current basin, and there would be bigger impacts with another one more than double the size of the first. While they indicated a dust abatement plan must be in place, there is yet to be one that we have ever seen, and the one was not in place the night that they approved this permit. They said they didn't know if one was at DEQ, but they had not received one. And to date, we have never seen anything that would relate to dust abatement on the property. P&Z agreed that there would be no impact related to noise. or excuse me, that there would be an impact related to noise, yet no requirements or stipulations were ever put in to at least control noise in any specificity. The board erred by not placing restrictions to prevent environmental and health impacts on surrounding neighbors. Thus, P and Z failed to meet the requirement of section 1-705, section 9 of the zoning ordinance. While a 300-foot buffer was required by P and Z, it does not adequately protect the millers from health hazards from crushed gravel, large amounts of dust, sediment in their well, flooding their septic system, or property damage from vibrations. Landscaping requirements currently exist with gravel pits that are by Bonneville County and should have been followed. In the hearings, Enterprise stated that the final landscape would look like the first basin did in 2024. It is nothing but a large pile of rocks. And Commissioner Walker, yesterday, as you talked about what you envisioned these could look like, that's what we were told by Mr. Kerr before they ever built the first gravel pit. And we did bring this up at both hearings. Mr. Kerr said to Dana and I one day when we were walking at the church across the street, and he drove in and he said, "You're going to love it. It's going to look like a park. It is going to be so beautiful. They'll be walking past and there'll be trees and landscaping. It's going to be beautiful." So we took him at his word. And if you've ever driven by it, it is nothing but a big pile of rocks. And even during the time that water is in it, it is not beautiful because you can't see the water. Most people don't even know the water's ever in there. Additionally, there are no public walkways. Many people have asked us, what is that eyesore? And that is the word they've used. What is that eyesore next to your home? And they're talking about the one that's currently there. So P and Z erred when they did not set out requirements for landscaping, or at a minimum require ECC to follow the gravel pit landscaping requirements, which would put trees and a big buffer between us and it so that it would be beautiful around it. They merely suggested ECC work with the millers, and this was because P and Z staff indicated P and Z did not have the authority to dictate this. We believe this was in error. P and Z also erred by not requiring a copy of the dust abatement plan and indicate how it was to be monitored. As this is a requirement, the project should have been denied. As of January 22nd meeting, ECC had not submitted one per P and Z commissioners. P and Z erred by not setting requirements for landscaping or noise control, including any operating hours. And they do go early till late. These unresolved issues underscore the board's failure and errors to thoroughly assess and mitigate the environment and health impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. Number 10, location relative to the floodplain. There really isn't anything here that we have. It is confirmed that it is within a floodplain. Number 11, availability of sufficient utilities. Chairman Ward indicated that the availability of sufficient utilities is not necessarily applicable in this case. Number 12, preservation of unique scenic and ecological areas. Commissioner Hoff expressed the opinion that there is not a lot of preservation associated with a gravel pit. Gravel pits typically disrupt unique scenic and ecological areas, leading to habitat destruction, landscape alteration, and long-term ecological degradation. This ground has been a home for at least 30 years to fox, elk, pheasants, deer, geese, ducks, quail, and many other types of habitat. We have photos of all of that we've seen. They were not deliberations and didn't talk about whether or not animal life would be impacted by this project. The lack of preservation efforts in the board's decision undermines the importance of protecting these valuable natural resources and maintaining the ecological balance of the region. Number 12, the sunset clause. This was probably the worst one. Sunset clause helps ensure accountability, that the projects are completed within a reasonable time frame, preventing them from dragging on indefinitely. Pertaining to this, P and Z erred in the following ways. P and Z did not set out exact deadlines for the project to be completed. P and Z did not include a requirement for site reclamation within a set period after mining concluded. P and Z did not set a timeline for when all spoils, dirt, pit run, and gravel were to be removed from the property. P and Z did not set a timeline for when all gravel must be crushed. P and Z did not set out stipulations for hours of operations. They did not set out a timeline for when all finished landscaping must be completed. Commissioner Phil pointed out that the clause should not be left open-ended and must be enforceable, and yet they did just that. They put no time frame on the project. Commissioner West stressed the importance of strict operating hours and a strict sunset clause. Again, they did not set requirements for either. P and Z made errors because there were no overall project end date requirements set. I want to stress this gravel pit is not required. This should be about an aquifer recharge basin. P and Z did not define what is temporary either when they related it to the gravel pit. What is a temporary gravel pit? Aren't all gravel pits essentially temporary because once they're mined out, then aren't they done? They don't stay a gravel pit for eternity. IDWR didn't even know there was going to be a gravel pit when they approved funding for this. We do not need additional gravel pits in Bonneville County. Gravel pits with crushing of gravel could be years and years. Who is to say how long the dirt and the gravel will stay on that property and be such an eyesore? And I do want to mention, while I'm talking about the dust blowing across that highway could be a big issue as we have these winds. Those piles are huge and that highway is busy and it's 65 miles an hour. There's already been one accident on there due to dust blowing from a big pile of dirt. Not this pile of dirt, a different pile of dirt. P and Z erred by not setting out rules for gravel pit regulations and should have required ECC to follow the county gravel pit guidelines because that document doesn't indicate a short or long-term gravel pit. Additional errors. Enterprise took the chance by starting this project without a permit. They indicated, I can move dirt around on my own land all I want. No one will stop us because we're too far along in the project. But they are not just moving dirt on their land. They were building a basin and creating a nuisance for their neighbors. Bonneville County Planning and Zoning erred by not requiring ECC to stop until they had a permit. They would not allow a contractor to start building a new neighborhood without a permit, even if that contractor said, I can move all the dirt around that I want. We have recommendations. Number one, put the dirt back. We would like that. Return it to the flood irrigated farmland that it was previously. IDWR has told us and indicated that grant money is still available if they were to move to a different location. The money would be there. ECC has a bond, so they could use that to cover the cost of putting it back. It was their own fault that they started in the first place. They did it without a permit or without anyone saying, go ahead. ECC took the chance. They should have to face any consequences. Number two, we don't want this. We've never planned on moving, but purchase our home at a fair market value because we don't want to live next to this. Number three, allow the aquifer recharge basin only if you have to. And we prefer you don't do that. We prefer number one or number two. But if you proceed forward, we have to talk about it, even if I don't want to. Deny the gravel pit. Please deny the gravel pit. Deny crushing gravel on site. Require the removal of the dirt, the pit run, and the gravel within 6 months. Put strict requirements on landscaping and buffers. I missed the buffers on here, but and buffers. Please put strict requirements on a sunset clause for each stage of the project and for total completion of the project. There's no reason they can't build a aquifer within 1 year if they needed to. They're almost finished with the one that they have. Then make them clean it up, be done by fall, and be done. If that's the process that you have to continue forward, have them move everything. And that's what we would ask, is that it would be 1 year from the time that they started, which was November the 1st of 2024. Even though they were permitted, but November 1st is when they actually started digging this. No aquifer recharge basins. This is what we recommend for this and any other ones. No
Let
aquifer.
me stop you there,
Yes.
Ms. Miller. All of these recommendations, they're nothing we can do anything about today, because the only thing we can do today is decide whether or not planning and zoning made an error in their decision.
Okay. I thought we were asked to do recommendations too, okay? Because everything else is recommendations. Thank you.
I'm not saying those recommendations might not be valuable.
That's
Just
okay.
not what we're hearing today.
Okay. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If you, let's just say, you said we are going to say that they made an error. Do you then decide? Does it go back to them
Goes back to planning and zoning.
to make decisions? And do they understand what a bird deed? Somebody's saying no in the back.
Understand your question.
She's saying if we decide there's an error, what happens then? Do we then make the decision about the permit or does it go back to planning and zoning?
I don't think you have to make that determination right now.
No.
No,
That wasn't
it's
the
a,
question.
that's not the question.
No, we're not we're,
It's a hypothetical.
Yeah.
If you, then what?
Right, I just want to know.
Probably isn't. Ask that question after.
I'm extrapolating from other experiences, but if we decided there was an error, she's asking, does this commission then decide the permitting process or does it go back to the planning and zoning commission?
So this is Weston Davis, County Attorney. Generally speaking, you have, I believe, a number of options, and I would have to go back and look at the ordinance and see. However, you do have the option of remanding this back to the Planning and Zoning Commission for them to make findings consistent with the decision you make. I believe, although I would have to check with the code and see, you may have the option to hold a public hearing and stand in the place of the Planning and Zoning Commission to have that hearing. But that would be separate and apart from this hearing today. I would have to go and look at the ordinance. I don't remember.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That helps. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you.
I'm Dana Miller at 7656 North 55th East. I'll be brief as she covered most of our points here today. So first, I want to apologize for you having this on your shoulders. Planning and zoning also was overwhelmed with all they had to consider when the state kind of dropped this on the county. I want to skip down to a few of the reasons, some of the things that was said at the January meeting that wasn't taken into account when they deliberated on their decision. One was when Merlin Spalding, who testified yesterday, gave his testimony in January. They did not, I don't know if they didn't hear him but they never referred to his testimony when they were deliberating. And to quote him out of the January meeting, Mr. Spalding, who is on the progressive board, and he is also my father-in-law. Daryl stopped by my house a few months ago and said, "How will you feel when I put a big pile of dirt next to your daughter, Darla Miller's house up there on Highway 26? Mr. Spalding said, "I felt threatened when Mr. Kerr stopped by my house and said, 'I've got Governor Little in my pocket. He said he does anything I ask him to do.'" That should have been taken into consideration when they were considering why he was doing a gravel pit. Is it to put water in the ground? Is it revenge? Is it for money? Commissioner Tuttle, during this same hearing, told us when they were deliberating, he said, "Your rights end at your property line." This is not correct. This was a statement he made that's not right. As Darla referred to, State Code 52-101 says that we have a right to a quiet enjoyment, which ensures that you can use and enjoy your property without substantial interference. Activities that cause a significant noise, dust, or vibrations, such as excavation, a gravel pit, and rock crushing, constitute a private nuisance. That should be considered in their decision also. It was also noted in the January meeting that only one member of the Planning and Zoning Commission drove out to actually see in person our property. A picture of our home does not accurately show the complete picture of how our home is surrounded by dirt, rocks, dust, and noise. We have had no less than 40 to 50 people approach us and ask, "What is that eyesore going on next to your house?" When we explained that it's gonna be a recharge basin and a possible gravel pit, people explained, don't worry, the county will never allow this to go through if they drive out and see it. And so I would hope that each one of you have taken the time, if you haven't already, to drive out and see it in person. It's much different in person than it is in a picture. And again, as Darla referred to, most of the planning and zoning board did not take time to go through their packet. And one letter that I referred to that I want to bring up today, very important, from a Idaho Water Board member, Brian Olmsted, that was in that packet. He voted for the project, and then he wrote us a letter after that. He said, "Hi, Dana and Darla, Brian Olmsted here. I will talk to some folks tomorrow and see what we can do about your situation. I certainly didn't know it was going to be so close to your home, and honestly thought it would expand the existing pit towards Willow Creek. The water board wants to do all we can to improve aquifer levels, but we also want to be good neighbors and most certainly do not want to damage your well or your property. Thanks for contacting us." We've had at least 3 other board members contact us and apologize to us, stating, "I have to work with other board members, so I don't want my name used, but I'm sorry this project was approved. We didn't know it would be so close to your home." So the Idaho Water Board is retracting a bit, and part of the reason, I think, for this moratorium that was discussed yesterday. So I won't go over some of the solutions. You've already talked that we don't do that today. So we're asking to please help us right this wrong the commissioners have made, and the mistake the board members of the Idaho Water Board have admitted and apologized to us that they made. Help send a message to the board and canal companies that they must be more diligent in using better locations for their basins. Put Bonneville County residents' rights above individuals who put their self-serving interests above neighboring residents' rights. We're asking no more than any of you would want if this were your property. We're asking no more than any water board member would want if this were their property. And please help us by voting to relocate this basin and allow us to have our former quality of life back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, are you ready for me to proceed?
Yes, just state your name and address.
My name is Courtney Stallings. I'm an attorney for Enterprise Canal Company. My address is 350 Memorial, Idaho Falls.
And if you could speak up too, please. You're speaking this way and everybody knows, I mean, a lot of people are listening now.
I'm not typically accused of being soft-spoken. I can do it. We have 2 requests of this board today. First, this board should deny the Miller's appeal because they have failed to demonstrate that the Planning and Zoning Commission decision was erroneous. And they have failed to demonstrate that the record is inadequate as a whole for the Planning and Zoning Commission to have made a well-reasoned decision upon a supportable record. Second, we request this board grant Enterprise's appeal, cross appeal, find that certain conditions imposed on Enterprise were erroneously reached and not made by the applicable relevant standards under law. We request the Board of County Commissioners affirm the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval of the use, but reverse the decision to apply a condition of a 300-foot setback and to issue a permit to allow Enterprise to move forward. I have been listening carefully to the comments today. Last week, in an effort to better understand the concerns of all involved, I visited the project site and I picked up this rock, this stone, and I placed it into my pocket. I bring it here today, not to cast it at opponents there has been enough stone casting. Instead, I would invite this Board of County Commissioners to, together with me, turn over the stones. Examine the facts, examine the record of the decision-making process of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Examine the relevant criteria under the Bonneville County zoning ordinance, and to affirm the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission to approve Enterprise's application for use on this project. Because the record establishes that the planning and zoning decision was reached under the proper authority and after applying the relevant code, we believe the board should affirm the approval of Enterprise's use application. Enterprise, however, believes certain of the conditions were made in error and requests the board to reverse those conditions while upholding or affirming the overall approval. Bonneville County zoning 15114C establishes that Planning and Zoning Commission has delegated authority and may authorize a permit in an agricultural provided such use is similar to and compatible with the uses permitted in the same zone in which it is located. Bonneville County zoning ordinance 1512 governs appeals from the decisions of the Planning and Zoning Commission and states, if a determination is made by a separate board of adjustment, which was the Planning and Zoning Commission, it shall be final.
Let me see if you want to fly.
Unless a written appeal is made to the Board of County Commissioners of Bonneville County within 10 days from the date of the commission's decision. A written notice of appeal shall be filed within the Planning and Zoning Office, specifying wherein the Planning and Zoning Commission erred in reaching its decision. The applicable standard of review before this tribunal then is to review whether Planning and Zoning erred in its decision to approve the use of Enterprise's land to validate an existing recharge basin and authorize the temporary use of a mining operation in order to ultimately arrive at the creation of a second recharge basin. A quick overview of some of the facts and procedural background. On October 22nd, 2024, applicant Enterprise Canal Company Limited, a registered nonprofit in the state of Idaho, filed with Bonneville County an application for a use hearing. This is in the record. It should not be overlooked that they took this step. They filed the paperwork to seek all of the appropriate permissions and approval of their property, which has been contrasted with other similar projects raised by comments in opposition to this project. The application states Enterprise had previously purchased a parcel of land, a former gravel pit, and repurposed the pit with state funds and turned it into a recharge basin. Enterprise also purchased the adjacent property with the same intent. The record evidence this is contained in the staff report of the Planning and Zoning Commission. On November 19th, a public hearing scheduled for December 4th was noticed on the use hearing for Enterprise's application. The Planning and Zoning Commission received public input, both written commentary and during the hearing, and elected not to issue a stay, as has been represented by the appellants, but to just continue the hearing in order to solicit and obtain more information. That was done. The hearing was continued to January 22nd, 2024. During the hearing on January 22nd, 2024, additional public input was offered and heard, and the Planning and Zoning Commission deliberated and ultimately reached a 5-2 vote to approve Enterprise's application for a use hearing and to approve granting them a permit to proceed. As is required by law, the deliberations made that night and the decision reached was ultimately reduced to writing, and this is critical. That written decision serves as the final decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission. It was issued February 7th, 2025. The Millers had filed an appeal on January 31st, 2024, dated February 1st in an email regarded as received by the Planning and Zoning Commission as of February 3rd. Enterprise filed a notice of cross appeal and waited for the written decision, which came again on February 7th, triggering the 10-day clock. Enterprise's notice of cross appeal was filed February 17th, 2025, well within the 10-day timeframe in order to appeal the written decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Turning first then to the Miller appeal. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not err in approving the project after the use hearing, and the Miller appeal fails to articulate the errors in the February 7th, 2025 written decision. Under Bonneville County zoning ordinance, the Board of County Commissioners reviews the decisions of the Planning and Zoning Commission to assess whether their decision was reached in error. What does that mean? Simply, it means that the Board of County Commissioners reviews the relevant ordinance, the code provisions, and makes a determination of whether the Planning and Zoning Commission correctly identified the controlling standards and reached their decision in an exercise of reason supported by the record. Bonneville County has exercised its constitutional power in creating a zoning ordinance which controls. Bonneville County has enacted zones and codified approved uses for each of those zones. It is undisputed in the record that the two parcels of land at issue here owned by Enterprise are each in agricultural zones. It is also undisputed that the Miller property adjacent to each of those parcels is in an agricultural zone. On appeal, the Board of County Commissioners looks to the record that was before the Planning and Zoning Commission and only that record to determine when they made the decision whether or not their approval was in accord with the controlling standards. Expansions of the record, as have been proffered by the Millers, are improper. And we urge you to not consider materials outside of the record before the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Miller appeal does appropriately identify Section 1705 as the criteria the Planning and Zoning Commission should have addressed in reaching their decision. But backing up just a bit, Bonneville County Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 7 governs agricultural zones and the characteristics of land use in that area, mandating that the uses be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Chapter 7, Section 1703 requires use hearings for representative uses that are agriculturally compatible. As stated plainly in the code, representative uses of land within agricultural zones include water reservoirs, water facilities, quarries, gravel pits, rock crushers, rock quarries, mines, and oil and gas wells, among others. The record demonstrates the Planning and Zoning Commission applied the correct standards to conduct a use hearing in an agricultural zone, and the Miller's appeal is not supported by the record before the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Miller's appeal and the comments today contain extraneous commentary, and at times their written appeal entirely misstates the written conclusions reached by the Planning and Zoning Commission in that February 7th, 2025 decision. Walking through the criteria of Section 1705, as Mrs. Miller did, is important to highlight what the relevant standards are. However, there were discrepancies in what has been presented as the conclusions and what the actual conclusions of the Planning and Zoning Commission were. And I urge this commission to carefully review the February 7th decision to assess each of those criteria. But the four most important may be this. Criteria number 1, to assess the impact on existing agricultural operations. Page 3 of the Miller appeal states, the Planning and Zoning concluded there was no effect on agricultural operations. This is not true. The February 7th, 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission's decision states, and I quote, there is an impact to agriculture. It is a positive impact to agriculture, close quote. Criteria number 2, to establish the need for a proposed change. Page 3 of the Miller appeal incorrectly calls this, and repeatedly calls this, a gravel pit, which I took the time to look up in the definition section of Bonneville County zoning ordinance. It is not there. A gravel pit is not defined under Bonneville County zoning ordinance. However, we know that a representative use in an agricultural zone includes water reservoirs, quarries, gravel pits, rock crushers, and other uses that can be considered as agriculturally compatible. Back to criteria number 2, to establish the need for a proposed change. The Millers assert that this is a gravel pit, but continue to refer to extraneous material outside of the record that was before the Planning and Zoning Commission. Instead, looking to the final decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission, they concluded, this is a quote, "There is a need to recharge the aquifer." In other words, there is a need under this proposed change. This was a well-reasoned decision, properly made on the record. Criteria number 3, to assess the benefit of the proposed change to the county and the neighborhood. Page 4 to 6 of the Miller Appeal, again, incorrectly labels this as a gravel pit, contains improper materials, raises claims not proper for this tribunal to determine, in other words, introducing private nuisance claims, and confuses the standard the Planning and Zoning Commission was to employ, and this Board of County Commissioners is mandated to review. The decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission, however, states, and this is a quote, "There is a need to mitigate any adverse effects of the temporary mining operation," clearly demonstrating they considered this criteria and came up with a plan. Those plans are contained in the conditions listed in that February 7th, 2025 letter. Criteria number 4, to assess the compatibility of the proposed change with the comprehensive plan. I've heard multiple times now that the Planning and Zoning Commission was confused about which comprehensive plan they were to apply, to consider. However, the February 7th, 2025 decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission makes it entirely clear. They appropriately considered Bonneville County's comprehensive plan, and the conclusion, as stated in that letter, is, quote, "The request is compatible with the comprehensive plan." Turning back to that February 7th decision, I think it's very important to revisit what the Planning and Zoning concluded. The staff comments say, "This property is located within an urban residential land use designation. The urban residential planning goals can be located on page 33 in the comprehensive plan." That's Bonneville County's comprehensive plan. "The urban residential land use is intended for a variety of uses. The residential growth has not reached this area and is still an agricultural use. The comprehensive plan has goals to protect the viability of the county's agricultural industry by limiting the potential conflict between agriculture and other land uses. Additionally, the plan provides water supply goals, which this project squarely meets, and addresses the area's city of impact policies." The Planning and Zoning Commission's conclusion was this: the request is compatible with the comprehensive plan. In the interest of time, I will skip over a few of these other conditions, but we need to talk about condition number 7 under section 1705. That was to assess impacts on traffic loads, public roads, quality of county roads, width of right-of-ways, relationships to long-range road designs and networks, and indicates that the Road and Bridge shall review. If you look at the conditions in the approval the Planning and Zoning Commission reached, it specifically requires Enterprise Canal Company to have an ongoing, cooperative, iterative process with County Road and Bridge and with the Idaho Transportation Department, if necessary, which Enterprise is committed to do, to continue to be cooperative. It was placed as a condition of approval for a reason. The Planning and Zoning Commission exercised their decision-making authority properly in this matter. As has been previously stated, it's not in the floodplain. We're not concerned about utilities. But more importantly, what the decision shows is that under each of those specific criteria, the county, as they gathered the information from the application, sent it to the relevant agencies, and they all determined there was nothing to comment on. What they say in the decision is traditionally comments are received when they have concerns. In other words, it was reasonable for the Planning and Zoning Commission to conclude that no comment back from agency meant no concern. In other words, move forward. Approval is properly reached. The sunset clause. This is not contained in section 1705 as a criteria that needs to be reviewed and employed. We don't dispute the Planning and Zoning Commission has authority to place reasonable conditions and restrictions. However, I think it's important to note a few things. Enterprise is not seeking to operate a gravel pit. Enterprise is in the water business. Enterprise, if Enterprise could snap its fingers and have 2 basins ready to go tomorrow, would have 2 basins ready to go tomorrow. They are not endeavoring to engage in operating a gravel pit. They've applied for the use in order to prepare the land for that ultimate goal. They've applied for that use to be able to remove the overburden from the property in a way that benefits not just Enterprise, but an abundance of projects above and beyond the canal company's interest. This site will have ongoing intermittent maintenance, much like our Greenbelt does, or roads do, or any other infrastructure might. Just as would be required for any other portion of the canal company's property, including the existing canals. However, Enterprise is committed to and urgently working towards preparing this parcel, this property to be that ultimate aquifer recharge basin, not to operate a gravel pit. The Miller Appeal next introduces 2 reports, some of which you heard more about, neither of which were contained in the record below and are improper for this commission to consider when reviewing the planning and zoning decision to approve the use. The Miller Appeal also fails to specifically articulate where the Planning and Zoning Commission erred in applying the relevant standards and criteria, and how the conclusions they reach, which again are contained in that February 7th, 2025 letter, were reached in error. Enterprise maintains the Planning and Zoning Commission did not err in approving the use, and the decision is supported by the record. Again, what does the record establish? 2 key points. First, the application for the use hearing request is a clearly contemplated use in agricultural zones. And second, the Planning and Zoning Commission applied the right criteria and reached their approval under their appropriate authority, considering all of the data and comments gathered to deliberate after 2 public hearings were conducted. To my first point, the project is already permitted as an approvable use, a representative use under the applicable standards for agricultural zones in Bonneville County. Planning and Zoning approved this project, finding the use was compatible with the uses permitted in the same zone and was in harmony with the objectives and characteristics of the zone and the comprehensive plan. It is important to remember the Millers are not homeowners living in a residential zone. They are homeowners who came to an agricultural area. The record establishes, and they have testified, that 30 years ago, they purchased and built their home next to an existing gravel pit to the south and an open field to the east. Historical images that I offer as a demonstrative exhibit only from Google Earth show that in September of 1992, this is what the property looked like just before the Millers testified they purchased their land. Note the existing pit to the south of what is now the Miller parcel. Note that the gravel pit predated the Millers' construction of their residence. Next, the February 7th decision correctly establishes section 1705 of the zoning ordinance applies to the project, and the record shows each factor was properly considered and properly concluded in favor to approve Enterprise's use, as has previously been discussed. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not err in approving the use, and the overall approval is supported by the record. When a conclusion is supported by the record, it is incumbent upon a board of county commissioners in an appellate capacity to approve the decision. This is further supported by case law. In Evans v. Board of Commissioners of Cassia County at 137 Idaho 428, the county issued a use permit to the developer of a gravel pit. Again, I do not wish to confuse the issue. This is not a gravel pit. However, in that case, when a gravel pit was being sought as an ongoing operation, the neighbors in a subdivision of $200,000 luxury homes appealed, contending, among other things, that the gravel pit was not consistent with the comprehensive plan. On review, a court held there was ample evidence in the record to support the county making a finding of consistency with the plan, which by its own terms encouraged gravel extraction. Again, please remember, representative uses of this land as contemplated by the code include water facilities, water reservoirs, even gravel pits, quarries, rock crushing specifically, and other agriculturally compatible uses. Here, Enterprise is not seeking approval of a permanent gravel pit. Rather, it is seeking to put the land into the beneficial use to the agricultural community as two aquifer recharge basins, which everyone has agreed are vital under present circumstances. The goals and the objectives of the plan and the objectives specific to agricultural zones have been met and directly supported by the planning and zoning decision to approve the temporary use to authorize Enterprise to remove overburden on its way to create the permanent use of the land. The decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission to approve this temporary use and approve the permanent use should therefore be affirmed. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not err in approving the use. However, some conditions were reached in error and should be and can be corrected by this commission. Again, it's imperative even to stress, this is not a gravel pit. Gravel pit standards do not apply, and it would be error to make a condition of approval by applying the standards for a gravel pit, specifically by applying a 300-foot setback. The appellants erroneously suggest the gravel pit standard should be applied against the project, but this is not a gravel pit. It is properly categorized as a water reservoir, which is a clearly represented use under the code. The Planning and Zoning Commission erred in rendering this condition of a 300-foot setback from the Miller's property for the basin. Even were the project a gravel pit, looking to the guidelines included in the record and requested to be considered by the Millers, that document expressly states for setbacks under 3 provisions. Let's quickly walk through them. The first would be a 300-foot setback from an approved county road. This could apply. Second would be a 20-foot setback from a dissimilar adjoining property. This may also apply. Third, if and only if adjacent property is zoned residential development, which is not applicable here, would a 300-foot setback from that property line or additional property buffering be required. Here, the 300-foot setback from the Miller property employs the wrong standard if the project were a gravel pit at all. But because it is not, even considering the temporary use to extract the overburden, it is clear error to require more than anything but 300 feet from the county road and a 20-foot setback from the Miller property as potentially a dissimilar adjoining property. It's critical to note, it is zoned the same. It is not a dissimilar property. Section 1704 of Bonneville's code establishes the uses that are to be considered for agricultural land. Again, this includes water reservoirs and water facilities, rock crushers, rock quarries, mines, and even gravel pits. Though it would be improper to continue to refer to this project as a gravel pit. Here, Enterprise is asking for temporary permission to use rock crushers to move the ground to prepare that site for the permanent use of the aquifer recharge station. As has been offered before this board and in other hearings, there's broad public support for efforts to recharge the aquifer, and these recharge basins are both vital and expediently needed in light of the settlement agreements to avoid future curtailment issues. Enterprise's application was submitted October 22nd, 2024. It is now April 2nd, 2025. To claim that Enterprise has tried to circumvent the authority of the county or the state, to flout that they have been flagrantly disregarding the concerns of neighbors, the concerns of appropriate boards, is nothing more than casting stones. Time is of the essence for Enterprise, who has at every juncture sought for approval through the proper channels, who has gone above and beyond the standards applicable to be good neighbors and has been willing to have an iterative process and is willing still to iterate with the tribunals to be good neighbors to the Millers, to be good neighbors to the county. They have been unfairly met with outrageous claims in seeking to develop the land for a use that benefits far more than the canal company. This project is about water. Water, which is vital to every aspect of supporting life in this community. This project is about protecting the resources available to citizens here for generations to come. Enterprise has the vision necessary to prevent future devastation to our water supply. Enterprise has a goal to benefit the community. The Planning and Zoning Commission recognized this. The Planning and Zoning Commission got the decision to approve right. The board can affirm their vote to approve the use because the decision was reached by applying the relevant standards and was supported by ample evidence in the record. Today, you have heard two perspectives, the understandable concerns and frustrations of property owners, the Millers who came to a rural agricultural zone and built a home with complete knowledge of the location they selected, situated on the corner of a county arterial road and a busy highway, next to an existing gravel pit. The Millers claim they support the aquifer recharge basin overall, the end goal of this land use project, but state they disagree with how Enterprise should be allowed to use Enterprise's land based on speculation, based on self-serving statements that they have been harmed by this project. But land use decisions are not made on bare assertion. Both the Constitution of the United States and the Idaho State Constitution regard the free use of land, the right to the beneficial use of your private property as sacrosanct, and it is to be vigorously defended. Land use decisions are governed by a careful application of the relevant standards enacted through valid ordinances by local cities and counties. And when those decisions are challenged, reviewing bodies, such as yourself, must look to the record to determine whether the decision was reached by an exercise of reason and application of the relevant standards. Here, this honorable board can find that the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval was reached through an exercise of disciplined reason after applying the correct standards for land use in agricultural zones and is supported by the record. You've also heard from Enterprise, who has an end goal that is focused on water recharge basins, which undeniably inure to the benefit of the community and to our citizens in the immediate area and to the state more broadly. Enterprise has previously presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission, all of this is properly in the record before the board, multiple scientific reports from credible experts addressing the concerns of the Millers and demonstrating how the project meets the objectives for an approved use and exceeds so many of the standards. More though, the record is replete with the ongoing efforts of Enterprise's willingness to work with the county and with the Millers to ensure the end result, and the process to get there is safe, is respectful, and does not cause irreparable harm to the Millers. Enterprise is committed to this. They're committed to doing all that is necessary and reasonable to mitigate the impact of the site preparation as is contemplated in the February 7th decision for the Millers, and the record will reflect Enterprise's ongoing willingness to meet and to exceed minimum requirements. But even if this project yielded more than the speculative damage the Millers have raised, neither this board nor the Planning and Zoning Commission are the appropriate tribunals to determine those liabilities, all of which can be and indeed should be addressed through the appropriate mechanism available to all Idaho citizens by bringing a private nuisance claim before a court by making the decision to sue. That ensures the proper procedure for any of the now speculative concerns, if they come to fruition, that all of the evidentiary protections are afforded to both the Millers and to Enterprise. What you have heard are thinly veiled private nuisance claims, which are not proper to raise before the decision makers here today, nor would they have been proper for the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider in reaching their decision. In sum, the record clearly demonstrates The applied for use is consistent with the objectives for an agricultural zone. Enterprises project is not in conflict with the comprehensive plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission's decision to approve the project was made upon substantial evidence after applying the relevant standards under Bonneville County zoning code and comprehensive plan. References to deliberations are not the same thing as the written decision reached on February 7th. I urge this commission to stick to the record, to review the ultimate decision reached, and to assess whether or not the Planning and Zoning Commission erred. We maintain they did not. Again, I'll end where I started. We have two requests of this board. First, deny the Miller's appeal because they failed to demonstrate the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision was erroneous. And they have further failed to demonstrate that the record is inadequate as a whole for the Planning and Zoning Commission to have reached a well-reasoned decision. Second, grant Enterprises appeal to find that certain conditions, chiefly that 300-foot setback, were erroneously reached and not made by the applicable relevant standard under the law. We request this board to affirm the approval of the use, but to reverse the decision to apply as a condition that 300-foot setback. With that, I'm happy to stand for questions and would respectfully reserve a few minutes to rebut if rebuttal will be allowed. Thank you.
Ms. Stallings, I had a question on when you were probably going through the chronology of the paperwork that was filed. I heard that you said January 24. Can you look back and see what you had on that?
For the hearing,
Yeah,
January 22nd.
okay.
They would be, I may have, January 22nd, 2025. I may have misspoken. Thank you, Commissioner Casper.
I think you said that this is already permitted by Bonneville County.
It's a permitted use. It's a representative use. It does require a use hearing, which is why the application was made.
So where is that permit? I guess is what I'm saying.
If you look to the February 7th decision,
Okay,
this is how it concludes.
the conditions for the use hearing, but we don't have an actual,
A permit has not been issued.
okay,
That
that's
is
what I
correct.
wanted to clarify. We have the February 7th letter with the findings and the conditions, but we don't have a permit issued because appeals were filed.
Correct. And all you would need a permit for is to exercise a commercial use of that property.
So at this point, if you guys want to accept rebuttal comments back and forth between the parties, you're free to do so. Would say there's necessarily a right to do so if you feel like you've heard the arguments. So I guess it's really to your discretion whether you want to hear rebuttals back and forth.
We haven't passed, like, in this instance, I don't see where. We haven't even gained from them yet, because we understood what they said. And that's what's important. We had questions, we'd ask them.
I'm sorry, we can't hear what you're saying.
Sorry.
If you were
that's
talking to us.
The nature of me. So at this point, if Planning and Zoning and Legal doesn't have anything further for us, we'll take this under advisement. And which means we won't discuss it between each other. We'll discuss it only individually with our legal counsel and our Planning and Zoning to answer questions we may have about what was presented in this hearing and information perhaps we have questions about in the documentation from the original Planning and Zoning hearings. And the answer or the decision will be noticed in a public meeting, which will be on our agenda in a week or so, when that fits in the agenda, but, so we'll post it in our posting for our agenda, that this will be a decision in that public meeting, and if you'd like to come for that decision or to zoom in for it, so that's posted on our webpage, and where else we post our agenda for the next 30 days. That was the hearing. Thank you. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for your succinct and orderly presentations. I greatly appreciate that for the other commissioners do as well. Makes the records far easier to go back and have a look at. If you're interested in reviewing this record, the video, Zoom's version of the subtitling is available on our webpage. No. I'm saying no. When's it available?
It's available if they email me and I can send you the link.
Takes a while to post and publish, so. All right, thank you. You can.